Good evening, creatures of the night. I hope the holidays were wonderful for you. As we move on to New Year, I wish you all a very safe holiday. And if you're like me, good luck on your New Year's resolutions. Speaking of resolutions, if you haven't made one yet, or you want another one, make the resolution of keeping up to date with all the books of my new series, Something Creepy. Werewolf Ranch came out a couple of months ago. The Haunted Doll dropped on Christmas Day. Every other month, a new book will come out, and the links will be on the description below. Have a good night, guys. Happy holidays, safe travels, and remember, don't miss your chance to scream. Alright, here's what you need to know about me. My name's Eli. I don't want to tell you my last name. I'm 41 years old, born and raised in Mississippi, and I've spent most of my life doing what folks around here do. Yard work, raise your kids, keep your business mostly to yourself. Try to enjoy whatever peace you can find between the noise. I'm married to my wife, Rebecca. Been together so long that we have a whole conversation without saying much of anything at all. She's the kind of woman who doesn't spook easy, but she also doesn't pretend she's tougher than she is. She'll tell you the truth, even if the truth is, I don't like that one bit. We have 2 kids. One boy, Caleb. He's the one who always wants to follow me around like a shadow. He's got that wide-eyed curiosity where he asks 100 questions and expects you to answer like you're the Discovery Channel. My little girl Emma is the opposite. She's quiet and sharp, the type who notices things without announcing that she has. If Emma gets nervous, it's because something's really wrong. We lived in a rural county, and I'm keeping the name out of this for a reason. I'm not trying to invite attention. I just want the people listening to know what happened. We weren't deep in the backwoods with no civilization for 50 miles or anything like that, but we were away from other people. Our place sat off a dirt road, and once you turned down our drive, you couldn't see another house unless the leaves were off the trees and you knew where to look. Behind our home, wood stretched out in a long band and then dropped into a low swampland. Not the postcard kind of swamp either. This was the real Mississippi kind. Water that doesn't always look like water. Mud that'll swallow your boot if you step wrong. Cypress knees poking up like broken teeth. And Spanish moss hanging low like the woods were trying to cover their face. I grew up around it. I wasn't scared of it. I loved it. That's important, because I'm not some guy who took one scary walk and decided the whole world is full of monsters. I've hunted. I've fished. I've tracked deer. I've cleaned hogs. I've heard coyotes screaming like something out of a nightmare and gone right back to sleep because that's just what they do. And for most of my life, I didn't believe in anything outside what a person can explain. Back then, there was no Dogman. I didn't believe in Bigfoot. There was no creature out there, and there was definitely not anything watching me. Then something happened that didn't care what I believed. The worst part is, it didn't happen once, not even twice. This thing showed itself to us 3 different times. The first time was strange. The second time changed me. The third time took away what little denial I had left. The first encounter was at the swamp's edge. It was early morning. One of those mornings where it's technically not hot yet, but the air already feels thick, like it's got weight to it. I woke up around 4:30. Rebecca was still asleep. The kids were still asleep. The house was quiet. It almost felt holy, like the world wasn't starting to argue with itself yet. I poured coffee, stepped onto the porch, and just stood there a moment. You could hear the night insects still going, and some were a way out. Birds were starting to test their voice like it was warming up. Fog sat low in the yard and pooled in shallow areas, turning everything gray and soft. I wasn't hunting that morning. I was just walking. That's something I do when my head gets too full. I like being out there before the sun's up. It's peaceful and honest. It's something I've done my entire life. The woods don't lie to you. If there's something there, you'll know. I took my usual path behind the house, down through the trees toward the swamp's edge. The ground dipped and got softer the closer you got. Leaves stuck to my boots. Somewhere in the dark, frogs were calling, and you could hear water moving in lazy little ways, like the swamp was breathing. At first, everything felt normal. And then I caught whiff of something that I couldn't explain. It wasn't subtle either. It hit me like somebody threw a wet blanket over my face. A thick, musky stink. Wet dog, but stronger. Sour, sharp. It had rot to it, but not like a dead animal that you stumble across. This was alive, like something had rolled in something dead, like the smell was part of something's body. I stopped walking mid-step. My first thought was, there's a hog nearby. Big hogs can smell foul, especially if they've been wallowing. My second thought, though, was, that's not a hog. Because the smell wasn't just bad. There was something wrong to it. And then the woods started shifting. I don't mean visually, but the feel of it. The frogs quieted like someone pressed their mouths shut. The insects dropped into a lower, scattered hum. The air felt like it tightened around me. If you've ever been in a room where a fight's about to break out and you can feel it, that's how it felt. Like nature itself went on high alert. I eased forward, slow, looking through the trees at the swamp's edge, creeped out by the lack of noise, because here in the swamp, everything always has a voice. The fog down there was thicker too, which didn't make matters any better. It was like it was hugging the water and the reeds, making it difficult to see around there. The cypress trunks looked taller and darker, and the Spanish moss hanging down gave everything a shape that could trick your eyes if you stared too hard. And then something moved across the water. Just a shift, a ripple really. Then a shadow shape behind brush on the far side. I crouched lightly, keeping my weight balanced because the mud near the edge can slide under you. I waited, telling myself that if it was a deer, it would step out soon enough. If it was a hog, I'd hear it rooting or snorting. But the brush parted, and it leaned forward. At first, I only saw its head shape through the gaps. I saw a long muzzle and a thick neck. The ears looked pointed and upright, like it was listening to me even though I wasn't making a sound. My brain started grabbing for any explanation that made sense. Maybe it was a big dog. But then it stepped out just enough that I could see the shoulders. They were too high. The shoulders were high like a man's shoulders, but broader, and the way it held itself wasn't like an animal crouched in a bush. It wasn't low, it was stacked, upright, like it was perched and ready. I felt my heart punch hard in my chest, and then it looked directly in my direction. I didn't feel this thing was looking past me. I didn't feel this thing was looking near me. I felt this thing was looking directly at me. Its eyes reflected the dim light. It looked pale, almost silvery, like glass catching the faintest dawn. And when those eyes locked onto mine, I felt something I don't have a better word for than pressure. Like the pressure around me changed, and this horrible feeling came over me instantly. It was like this thing was pushing into me with its stare. I found myself frozen, unable to move even a muscle. This creature, it didn't charge me. It didn't make any type of noise. It just held still and stared like it was waiting for me to do something. Like it wanted to see what kind of man I was. Then it shifted forward again, and the brush cracked under its weight. And that's when it did the whole intimidation thing. I'm telling you, that's what it was. It leaned its upper body forward and made itself bigger. The shoulders rolled, the chest expanded. It wasn't a bluff like a dog snapping from fear. This was measured, like it knew exactly what it was doing. Like it knew making itself bigger and more dangerous would scare the living hell out of me. A low sound came from it. It wasn't like a growl you hear in movies. This was lower, like a heavy, vibrating huff deep from its chest. And you can feel it more than even hear it. I realized right then that it was like I was being tested. My mind raced through everything I knew. Bears don't do that. Coyotes don't do that. Even big dogs don't act like that unless they're cornered or trained. This thing wasn't cornered. This thing was in charge of the situation. I backed up slowly, keeping my eyes on it. Every instinct screamed to run, but I didn't. I don't know if that was bravery or stupidity. I just knew turning my back felt like the wrong move. The creature held its posture as I retreated. It didn't follow. It watched me like a lion watches something it could catch if it decided to. When I got far enough back from the fog and the trees swallowed it, I turned and walked fast back toward the house. I was moving like I couldn't get away from that smell fast enough. Couldn't get away from that thing fast enough. When I stepped onto my porch, the sun was just starting to lighten in the sky. My hands were shaking. I set my coffee cup down and realized I'd never even took a drink from it. It was cold and untouched. I didn't tell Rebecca that morning. I didn't want to sound crazy. I told myself it was probably a big feral dog standing weird on a bank. But that smell and those memories stayed with me all day. And that stare stayed in my head all week. 6 months passed. 6 months of thinking of that thing. not telling anybody what I saw and trying to figure out what the hell it was. Life continued like it always does when you've got a family and jobs and bills. The kids went to school, Rebecca did her routines, I went to work. I tried my best not to think about that morning, but I also found myself looking out at the woods more than I used to. I stopped going down to that swamp edge alone, not consciously at first, but then I realized I was avoiding it. I made excuses. I was too tired, too busy, too muddy. Then deer season rolled around, and I told myself I was being ridiculous. Whatever I saw back then, it hadn't come back. It hadn't bothered me. It hadn't hurt anything. I figured it was a one-time thing. Man, was I wrong. The second encounter happened on leased hunting land, not right behind my house. It was a different stretch of woods, a good drive away even. Still in the same general part of Mississippi, but far enough that I would have sworn there was no connection. I climbed into my blind well before dawn, maybe 5:30. It was one of those enclosed elevated blinds, not just a little stand. It had a small window slot you could open, and I sat inside the dark with my rifle, listening for the woods to wake up. At first, everything seemed normal. The sky was a deep blue-black. The air was cold enough to make your breath visible, but the humidity still clung. A few birds called. Something small rustled in the leaves. And then that smell came. The exact same smell that came with that creature the first time. Wet dog, thick musk, sour, dead, yet alive. My stomach dropped so fast it felt like the bottom fell out of me, like I was on some kind of crazy roller coaster. I knew that smell could only mean one thing. There was only one type of creature that I would associate that smell with. That wolf thing that I saw 6 months prior. I sat up straight, every hair on my arm standing. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe deep. I just listened. And then I heard something moving through the brush. There wasn't any crashing or stumbling, nothing big or goofy that walks through the woods. It wasn't the reckless movement of a deer. This was slow. It was heavy. It moved left to right with a purpose, then paused. Then it moved again, like it was circling, finding the best angle. My heart was hammering so hard I was worried that thing could hear it. I could feel my pulse in my ears. I shifted my rifle up slowly, trying not to make any noise. I cracked the window slot just enough to see out. The woods in front of my blind were a mix of thin trees and scrub brush, with a small clearing about 30 yards out. Beyond that was thicker forest. When I opened it, the movement stopped. And then, from behind the brush line, that creature stepped out for the second time in my life. It was upright. Completely upright. It stood on 2 legs like a man. Like it had done it 1,000 times. This wasn't the awkwardness of a bear or a dog standing on its back legs. It wasn't acting like an animal, balancing. It stood tall, sure of itself, shoulders squared, arms long at its sides, head level, facing me again. And the eyes, well, the eyes found me almost instantly. It knew exactly where I was. That blind wasn't fooling it at all. It didn't take the time to search around. It didn't sniff the air like a confused animal. It looked directly at the blind window slot like it had been drawn straight to me. And then it just stared. Again, this creature wasn't making noise or growling or snarling. It wasn't making any type of dramatic movement. It stood there like a nightmare statue. I glanced down at my rifle and thought, if I shoot it, what happens? That's the truth. In that moment, my brain went into survival mode and I tried to calculate. But something stopped me. Part of it was fear. Real fear. Not this is scary kind of fear. The kind that makes your body feel like it's made of ice. The kind that tells you you're prey. And part of it was the way it acted. It wasn't acting like an animal surprised by a hunter. This thing wasn't spooked. It wasn't wary. It was confident. It was predatory. Completely aware of its surroundings and me. That stare didn't break, not one single time. Minutes passed. I kept expecting it to move, to do something. Step forward, make a sound, show some kind of emotion or aggression, but it didn't. It just held my gaze and pinned me in place. And that's when the terror got worse, because my mind started going to places that I shouldn't have. I thought about my kids. I thought about how I'd left that morning like it was another ordinary day. Kissed Rebecca, told her I'd be back by mid-morning. That thought, what if I never see them again? What if this thing gets me? What if my kids grow up without a father, Rebecca without a husband? That blind didn't feel like protection anymore. It felt like a trap, like a box in a tree where I'd be found. I realized my hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep my rifle steady. My mouth went dry. 10 minutes, and that's not an exaggeration. I know because I watched the little glow of my watch face. It was counting time like time mattered at all in this situation. But for 10 full minutes, that thing stared at me. I was being stalked by something that shouldn't exist for longer than I could possibly imagine. During that time, the creature shifted its weight a few times. I saw muscles roll beneath the fur. It had a build that didn't match anything I'd ever seen in our woods or in any other. Thick through the chest and shoulders, but the legs had that bent, animalistic look. The arms were too long for a man, hanging lower than they should, but those arms looked like they were pure muscle. The entire shape was just wrong, and it knew that I knew that it shouldn't exist. Finally, it moved. Slowly, it turned the head slightly to one side, like it was considering something. Then it stepped backward. Not hurried, definitely not afraid. It just simply backed into the brush like it had decided that it made its point. But it didn't just disappear. It stepped back, then paused and looked at me again, over its shoulder. Then it stepped again deeper into the trees, paused and looked back again. It did that several times, like it wanted to make sure I stayed exactly where I was. Like it was letting me live, but only on its terms. When it finally vanished into the trees, I stayed frozen for a long time. Eventually, I forced myself to move, but my body felt like it was full of lead. I opened the blind door and looked out, expecting to see it still there, expecting it to rush me like it does in scary movies. I knew that the second that I stepped down, I could be bait for this thing. But nothing happened. The woods were quiet, not peaceful. I climbed down slowly. My legs were so weak. The walk back to my truck was the longest walk of my life. Every twig that snapped made my heart race. Every twig that snapped made me think that that thing was back. Every wind gust made me think it was moving behind me. I kept seeing that silhouette in my mind, watching, waiting, making itself absolutely still. I got to my truck, got inside, locked the doors, and sat there shaking so hard I could barely turn the key. On the drive home, I kept checking my mirrors like a fool, like it was going to be jogging next to me or something. It felt like it was there. Its presence was lingering, but it wasn't anywhere to be found. The smell still felt like it was in my clothes, in my hair. When I got home, Rebecca looked at my face and immediately knew something was wrong. When she asked, I couldn't even answer at first. I just sat down and put my head in my hands like I'd been in a wreck. That's when I told her. At first, she had trouble with it. Not because she thought I was lying, but because what I said didn't fit reality as she understood it. She asked me questions like, what did it look like? Are you sure it wasn't a bear? Are you sure you weren't half asleep? Are you sure the light wasn't playing tricks? I answered every question, and she watched me. Rebecca knows me. All the years of marriage, going through childbirth twice, the two of us know each other inside and out. She knows the difference between me being dramatic and me being genuinely shaken. After a while, she stopped asking questions and just sat there with me, holding my hand. I believe you, she said quietly. I believe you, and I love you. And I'll tell you something. That almost made it worse. Because once Rebecca believed me, it wasn't just my problem anymore. It was my family's problem. And from that day on, I wasn't the same man. I started scanning tree lines. I started locking doors earlier. I started thinking about the wind, the direction of scent, the way things move in the woods, making sure the kids were never left outside alone, which they hated because they were so independent, because they'd always had free roam of our property. I kept telling myself it can't be a coincidence. Because if it was a coincidence, why did it feel so focused on me? Why did it feel so personal? And I can assure you, the one that I saw looked exactly like the first one. By the time of the third encounter, I was different than I'd ever been in my life. I was scared of being outside. A few months later, I got my third visit from this creature. The third encounter changed everything. Everything about my life. And it left a scar on my family that they still talk about to this day. It drove us from our home. It made my kids fear the woods, fear the dark, fear what's out there. It was evening, not late night, just evening. The kids were home, they were still awake, the lights were on, dinner still smelled in the air. Just our normal life. I was at the front door, doing that habit I developed where I checked the lock twice. Caleb was in the living room, and Emma was sitting on the floor with a book. Rebecca was in the kitchen rinsing dishes. And then I heard something that made my blood turn to absolute ice. The front door handle jiggled. Once. Then again, harder. Not like a kid playing, not like the wind. Like something was trying to open the door, or test it. Every sound in the house stopped. Caleb looked up at me with wide eyes. Emma didn't move, but her face changed. They knew that we weren't expecting anybody, and we weren't around anybody that would just walk into our home. Rebecca set something down in the sink and stepped into the hallway. The handle jiggled again. Then there was a low grunting sound right beside the door outside, heavy and close. I looked over at Rebecca. Her face went pale. All the blood drained from it. I got up and grabbed my rifle so fast I surprised myself. Not because I wanted to play hero, but because in that moment I knew I would do anything to keep what was on the other side of that door away from my children and my wife. That grunting sound continued, low and steady, but whatever was on the other side of that door sounded massive, and I knew it could only be one thing. It wasn't an animal noise, like a dog whining. It was deep, like something breathing through a heavy chest. I swear to you, I got a whiff of that smell. That same putrid, wet dog musk that had haunted me for almost an entire year. It came through the door crack like smoke. It was that potent. "Eli," Rebecca whispered. I didn't look back. I waved her back, waved her towards the kids, trying to keep my voice calm even though my heart was pounding so hard that it hurt. I told the kids to get behind her. I told all three of them to go into the hallway and to stay quiet. They listened because they could hear that thing outside too. The handle jiggled again, slower this time, like it was teasing us, like it knew we were right there where it wanted. I didn't open the door. I didn't do anything that would invite whatever it was to escalate. I just stood there with my rifle, breathing shallow, trying to decide what a man is supposed to do when something like that shows up at his front door. Then something scraped along the side of the house. It was this long, slow scrape, like claws dragging along the siding, like this thing was just taunting us. Emma gasped. Rebecca pulled her close. Caleb just stood there, not knowing if he should hide behind his mom or go help his dad. The grunting moved off the porch to the side. Then there was a thump against the wall. Not enough to break it, just enough to say, "I'm here." I realized it wasn't trying to break in. If it wanted to, it would have been in already. It was making itself known. It was trying to intimidate us. That's when I called the sheriff. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped my phone, but I kept my voice steady. I told them something was outside my house, some large animal, trying to get through the door. They asked me what kind of animal, but I hesitated. I said, "I don't know. It's not a dog or a person. It's something big. Please hurry." And then I called my brother. Now my brother Richard, he believes in these things. I used to laugh at him because he would watch all those stupid episodes of TV shows that talked about some kind of monster in the swamps. He's the type who's read every story, every weird thing, watched every documentary, always kept an open mind. We've argued about it before. I'm a God-fearing man. I don't believe in monsters, but after what I saw those last 2 times and what I was experiencing now, I knew I needed his help, because I had no idea what this thing was or what it was capable of. I used to call all of it nonsense, but here I realized that this thing was flesh and blood. When he picked up, I didn't waste any time. I need you to come here, right now. Something's outside, and I think it's something from one of your videos that you watch. He heard something in my voice and didn't ask questions, I think. He said, I'm on my way. Those next 20 minutes were torture. That creature moved around the outside of the house slow and deliberately. It walked across the porch because I heard the boards creak. It stopped at the windows because the grunting got a lot closer, and then it moved away. At one point, something tapped across the glass of the door. Not hard, like a knuckle, maybe a claw, just a gentle tap. Caleb whispered, Dad, what is it? I hated myself for not having an answer. Rebecca was still pale. Her eyes were glossy with fear, but she stayed quiet for the kids. I could see the comfort that they were taking in her effort. Then the creature did something that made me realize this wasn't just some animal acting on instinct. It exhaled loudly right outside the door. This heavy puff, and jiggled the handle again. When it realized that it still couldn't open the door, it seemed to get frustrated, and it made this growling sound that sounded more like anger than animal. Almost that same intimidating sound as the swamp encounter, but for some reason this just sounded so human this time. And then I started feeling like this thing remembered me, like it recognized me, like it was letting me know, I found you. I stood there with a rifle and thought, if it comes in, I'm going to have to shoot. And then thought, if I shoot, will it even matter? I could at least give Rebecca and the kids long enough to get to safety, to get to the car and get out of here. That's a thought no father wants to have. Sacrificing yourself to make sure that your family lives on without you. Those 20 minutes were grueling. Every scenario ran through my mind. If it came in and I shot and it didn't do anything, I'd have to throw myself at it. If it stayed out there and somebody got close to the house, would it attack? The sheriff didn't arrive before my brother did. I heard his truck coming down the dirt road and almost cried from relief. Headlights swept through the trees. Gravel popped under tires. I heard that creature grunt again like it was angry. Then there was a final scrape along the house, like it ran down the entire side with its paw or hand or whatever you want to call it, wiping across the wood. And then nothing. My brother came onto the porch fast, calling my name. I opened the door just enough to step outside, still holding the rifle. He looked at my face and said, "What was here?" I shook my head. I don't know, man. It looked like some kind of wolf that was walking on two legs. He walked around the porch, shining a flashlight. He had his rifle slung over his shoulder. There were scratches on the wood, but I couldn't tell you if it was from that thing or something else. By the time the sheriff arrived, 5 to 10 minutes later, that creature was long gone. Of course it was. All we had now was the word of me and my family. My family never even saw what this thing looked like. I could give a description if I needed to. The sheriff walked around, flashlight beam sweeping. He didn't laugh, and I'll give him credit for that, but he also didn't want to say what he thought. He talked about wild dogs and feral hogs and bears and stuff like that. The usual. The scientific. Not the paranormal. My brother said, "None of those animals jiggle handles, Sheriff." He didn't have an answer for that. He took a report like he had to, like it was his job, and then he left. And when the lights of his vehicle disappeared and the night settled back into its normal sounds, I realized something that made my stomach twist into 100 different knots. That was it for me. That creature had come to my home. It didn't run into me in the swamp or a hunting lease. My home. Where my kids sleep. Where my wife lives. Whatever this thing wanted, it was willing to push itself into my life. And I couldn't have that. You don't just bounce back from something like that. Not if you're honest with yourself. Caleb started sleeping with his door cracked so he could hear us. Emma started asking questions that she'd never asked before. "Can animals open doors, Daddy? Why would something come to our house like that?" Do you think it knows us? Rebecca and I started arguing, not because we were mad at each other, but because stress needs somewhere to go. She wanted to leave immediately. I wanted to pretend that we could just tighten things up, get cameras, get lights, be vigilant. Then I caught myself doing something that scared me. I started listening to the woods at night like I was waiting for it to come back. Like part of me expected it to come back. And I realized this wasn't just a one-night scare. This was a shift in how we lived now. I couldn't have that for my family. I couldn't have the people that I love the most in this world living their lives in fear. We moved in with my brother. It was temporary at first. That's what we told ourselves. Just until we felt better. Just until we had time to think. But the truth is, I couldn't shake the feeling that once it found my home, it could do it again. Rebecca tried to be strong, but I could tell it changed her too. She started jumping at noises, started double-checking locks just like me, started watching the windows the way that I do. That broke my heart more than anything. The kids adapted the way kids do, but they weren't the same either. Caleb got a lot quieter. Emma seemed to get older overnight. My brother, for his part, didn't act surprised. He was angry, like that creature had violated our lives, like the woods had crossed some kind of imaginary line or broke some rule that they were supposed to follow. And that's when I realized something else. The creature had been testing boundaries from the start. First the swamp edge, maybe a warning, an intimidation, a "this is mine" type of situation. At the hunting blind, it showed a full display of dominance. I can stand here and you can't do anything about it. And then the house. I can reach into your world if I want. This wasn't random encounters with this creature. This was progression. This thing was escalating. That's when I realized we had to go. If this thing was escalating, then the next obvious step was an attack. I had to come up with a theory because if you don't try to understand it, you go crazy, you see? Here's what I think, and I'm not pretending I know for sure. I think I crossed into its territory the first morning at the swamp edge. Maybe I got too close to something I wasn't supposed to see. A den, maybe a feeding area, a travel route, infants, who knows? It was definitely there first. I didn't notice it until it let me. And I think when it locked eyes with me, something happened. Animals remember things, right? So why not these creatures? People underestimate them. Bears remember faces, wolves remember threats, dogs remember scents like it's a language. Even elephants come back to burial grounds for generations. This creature seems smarter than all of them. I think this creature learned my scent and associated it with that moment of eye contact, that moment of challenge. And then, later, it found me again. How? I'll never know. Maybe by scent, maybe by something else. If this thing is a supernatural being, all the rules are off. But if it is just an animal, then it has to be some kind of instinct that drove it to me. Maybe it tracked the smell of my boots or my clothes. Maybe it recognized me like you recognize somebody's voice. And maybe it wasn't trying to kill me. At least not directly. At least not yet. Maybe it was doing what predators do sometimes. Checking, measuring, seeing if the same thing that entered its world is still there, still moving. But here's the part that chills me. It felt like ownership. Like this beast wasn't just claiming its land, but it was claiming mine too. Like it was challenging me the way a lion does when you go into a pride territory. It was deciding for whatever reason that I belong to it now. And once something like that decides you're part of its world, you can't go back to pretending you're just a man in the woods. So here are the possibilities that kept me up at night, and sometimes still do. Maybe an undiscovered predator? Something real, like flesh and blood that's adapted to avoid us? Something that can walk upright when it needs to? Something that's smart enough to stay hidden until it wants to be seen? Or maybe it's a remnant, something older than that, something that's been here longer than we've admitted. Our woods are older than our roads. There are stretches of swamp and forest that people don't go into. Some that people haven't even gone into for decades because they're so thick or full of vegetation. Some parts haven't even been discovered, I don't think. It's not because we're scared of them. It's because we can't get to them. Maybe that's where these things survive. Maybe it's a hybrid or an offshoot. I don't like this one, but it's crossing my mind. Something between species. Something that shouldn't exist but does. We've messed with nature in all kinds of ways. Strange animals show up all the time. People release things, breed things, experiment. Who knows what gets loose and adapts? Maybe it's something we don't understand. And I really don't want this to be the answer, but it might be. Because the way it acted wasn't just animal instinct. It felt like intent, like choice. Maybe this thing really is some kind of supernatural entity. I can't tell you what it is, not for certain. Until a dogman or a werewolf is seen and scientifically proven, all you have is the word of people like me. But I can tell you it was real. My family can tell you what they experienced that night. And I can tell you it was aware. As in, self-aware. That third encounter broke something in me. The way a man's confidence can crack and never fully mend. I can still be strong for my family. I can still protect them, but I can't unknow what I know, and I can't unsee what I've seen. Sometimes I wonder if my brain just thinks about it all the time as a coping mechanism, or if it's a way to prepare me in case it ever happens again. We stayed with my brother longer than we planned. Rebecca started talking about moving for real. The kids started settling into routines over there, and I realized something. That creature didn't just scare me. It changed the course of our lives. I still have a hard time calling it anything. Dogman feels like a label people slap on something they don't understand just so they can talk about it like it's a campfire story. But I get why the name exists. Because when you describe something like that without a name, people look at you like you're speaking a different language. And if you use the term werewolf, you're even crazier. All I know is this, though. It walked upright like it belonged that way. It stared at me like it understood me. It came to my home like it knew where I lived. And if a creature like that can do those things, then the world is bigger and darker than most people want to admit. I don't tell this story to be famous. I'm not even using my real name. Eli is just a name that I picked. Rebecca, Caleb, Emma, those are false names too. I don't tell it to convince skeptics. I tell it because if you live near the woods like ours, if you hunt or if you fish, or if you even walk the swamp edge at dawn because you think it's peaceful, you should understand something. We aren't always the top of the food chain. Sometimes the woods are watching back. Sometimes they remember you. And sometimes they come after you.